forget what car you're in.
Right. There you go. There you go.
Beachway and the dog. And then it wasn't until you were you had the same car as me, only
It's running.
Good morning. Welcome to the Septic-to-Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee meeting of January 9th, 2020. I think all of us up here would like to wish you a Happy New Year. We can make some progress this year. Call to order, please. Roll call.
Chair Neil Hannigan,
Present.
Member Ron Kern,
Present.
Member John Liscombe,
Present.
Member Roy Shines,
present.
Vice Chair Arthur Zepp.
Here. Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item today is approval of the November 21st, 2019 minutes. Anyone have any additions, deletions, corrections? No. I have a couple of corrections, but I'll wait for others to. Anyone else? No.
One second, I have a comment.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. And on page 5, the highlighted, underlined paragraph 2 at the top, we have seconded twice in the same thing. Strike one. The second one, I think, would be the one to strike. And on the previous page 4, second to the bottom paragraph, last line of that paragraph is commission until at a minimum answer have been formulated. We could change that to commission until at a minimum, comma, answers have been formulated for the existing questions. Just the grammar in the sentences. And those are the only changes that I have. Anyone else?
No, I'm going to leave it the way it is. It's fine.
Can we get consent on those changes?
Motion to approve minutes
As amended.
as amended.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Public comment, Kathy, could you give us the instructions for the public comment section, please?
The chair will invite the public to speak to the committee. Public comments on specific agenda items may be made later in the meeting when the items are taken up at the discretion of the committee. There is a 3-minute individual limit for public comments that will be timed by the town clerk. Public comment is not meant to be a question and answer period, and there will be no dialogue. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment, please come up to the podium and print your name and address on the sheet provided, and state your name and address for the record.
Should I fill this out later?
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Britt Flanagan. I'm at 5556 North Ocean Boulevard. I'm the Vice President of the Ocean Ridge Homeowners Association and also in charge of our sewer plant. At this time, I would like to thank everyone for their time, efforts on behalf of this sewer project. And I feel that it's important that you are aware of the status of Ocean Ridge as far as the aging sewer plant that we currently have and some concerns for the future. In May 2008, we had our Department of Health inspection, and at that time we were given a pass because we were under the impression that there was going to be a fairly quick movement with a collaboration of Ocean Ridge and Boynton Beach. So the Department of Health gave us a pass, and we were able to continue operating our plant. We have since, in November, received another inspection, and at that time we were cited for 3 variations that needed to be corrected. One is the replacement of all of our tanks, which are eroding at this point. It was considered critical by the Department of Health. We have been investigating the replacement of those tanks to the tune of probably about $40,000. Since 2018, we've put in about $15,000 in repairs, i.e. new pumps, a new catwalk, and prior to that inspection, we put in a new generator. So we are in the period of time of looking into some sort of collaboration, either through the municipality of Ocean Ridge or a collaboration only, or a collaboration with Boynton Beach and Ocean Ridge. We are probably moving towards a more critical state in our sewer plant. So as we move forward, we'd like to be considered as a priority looking forward when some plans are instituted for the town's position on the sewer projects. By then, we may have a new plant, but at this point, we'd like to at least be on the radar screen for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
That's the Crown Colony. Their corner will break on North Ocean.
Any other public comment this morning? Okay, let's move on to the next item then, which would be the discussion action items. Town manager report is number 1.
Yes, thank you. As directed at the last committee meeting, Chair Hennigan wrote a letter to the Town Commission requesting further direction regarding the committee's mission and deliverables. The Town Commission's direction at that time is for the town manager and financial consultant to complete the potable water contract negotiations without further exploration of that by the committee. The commission would like the committee, with assistance from staff and our financial consultant, to focus solely on septic-to-sewer conversion at this time, exploring all aspects of conversion, and to develop a comprehensive plan so that the town will be in the best position possible if the state mandates that the barrier islands convert to sewer in the future. Completing a comprehensive plan will put the town in a better position to apply for grant funding. Once the plan is in place, the commission desires a presentation in both verbal and written form. The commission also recognized that there's still a lot of work to be done on sewer conversion planning, and they thanked the committee for all of the effort and work that has already been put into this project so far.
Okay.
Are there any questions regarding what the commission direction is at this point?
I was going to ask if item 1 could be put up on the screen for the public to see, please.
Question 1, you mean? Yeah. Question 1?
Well, I have an item 1.
Oh, sorry.
labeled on
Sorry.
my-
Right, got it.
And then I just switch.
That's it.
Which section would you like me to go to?
Would you like me to read this part, or would you like to read it, Tracy?
I think my summary that I just gave kind of summarizes what that says.
I
Yeah.
just, it was just in a slightly different format.
Right.
So,
Basically, what the commission direction was is for the town manager and the financial consultant to work on potable water and to take it off of this committee's
Offline.
hands at this time. And then for this committee to focus solely on doing the septic to sewer conversion and exploring all aspects of that so that a comprehensive plan can be presented to them in the future.
okay. Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee in regards to this item?
No.
Okay. So let's go then to item number 2, grant funding and administration, a presentation by Ryan Ruske. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Septic-to-Sewer.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. Just to give you a brief background on our firm, we represent communities across the state, and we obtain grant funding for infrastructure improvements, capital projects, including water projects, wastewater projects, such as septic-to-sewer. We've been doing it for about 20 years, and the septic-to-sewer has really taken hold over the last few years. It's become a hot-button issue that funding is starting to flow to, and more action on the state level and the federal level is occurring. So I think that brought us to our first meeting with town staff in order to explore how best to put the city or the town in the best position possible to get funding in the future. In meeting with town staff, we found that the report that Ingenuity did was very comprehensive, and it puts you well ahead of many of the communities in this area, even around the state. We often go into a community and they don't have any sort of data, any sort of mapping, any sort of plan on how to proceed. In reviewing that report, you are already way past that point, which would put you in a better position than most communities. The key now is to how to best take advantage of that, and your committee as well. As we go for funding in the future, having such a committee makes a big difference. The state regulators, the federal government, even the regional agencies that we go to, they will really like to see the public participation and the commitment. A lot of communities don't have that sort of mechanism to move forward, so that's another benefit. The next steps that we talked about are to take that plan that was established and really build on that. As the town manager said, come up with a more specific course of action, and that can be both on the town side and on the resident side. When we look at funding for the septic conversion, we look at it in different areas. It's not only an environmental issue, which a lot of funding is now becoming available for, it's a public safety issue. Not only from a public health issue, but during time of storms. We had started to look at hazard mitigation money. If a storm does come, then septic systems are prone to fail, whether it's due to flooding, whether it's due to other adverse effects. So now it becomes an issue that it becomes a post-disaster problem for the towns. That opens up a whole nother realm of money that's available, and that's both to the town and to private residents as well. So that's something to take into account. We started off with saying over the next few months to the next year, the town has the ability to apply for several grants that will pay for this next step of planning, this next step of public education too. That's part of the planning effort is if you desire, that money can be used to help educate members of the community, the associations, other groups on the benefits, on what's needed, on what the actions are. You're doing a great job with it now by this committee, but this will pay for that outreach and the further engagement of the community, which is important, I'm sure, in the buy-in and in the future actions. Then that study as well, or report, whatever you want to call it, assessment, can go into determining the more specifics, what's needed. The report that was done by Ingenuity really narrows down, the specifics on what is there, the current conditions. But to get down into where those septic fields are, where, what the best course of action is, whether it's gravity, whether it's vacuum, those sort of things are really what needs to be ironed out so that when the time comes, you're ahead of the game. In the next probably 5 years, it's going to be mandated. That's the way this is going, where coastal communities are now going to be forced to make those changes. And you don't want to be behind in line at that point. Start doing it now. Start looking at the funding. Start being ahead. Because when that mandate comes, everybody's going to be in line for the funding. And then it becomes much different at that point and much difficult to achieve. There are opportunities now to start that and to do the planning, to finalize, get that assessment done with the public education. That'll then put you in the future, whenever you're ready to move forward, to get more money for only the town's option, whether it's water mains, whether it's infrastructure, to do the connections, and also on the private side. We have used grants in the future to help residents absorb some of those costs. It's been done in Hypoluxo, it's been done in other communities that take some of that financial burden off them. And that's really important too, to help, make that transition as easy as possible. And I think better off, we can just start it off. If you have any questions or discussions, we can move forward. I don't really.
Are you representing any other of the local communities?
We do various work for, like Hypoluxo is one of ours. We have about 35 cities throughout the state of Florida that we represent. They go from smaller communities to larger communities. Around here, we have Juno Beach, North Palm Beach, Royal Palm Beach, Wellington. Hypoluxo is the one closest to you guys, and then we go down into Broward. We go all the way up to the Panhandle as well.
Okay.
Question. You mentioned that you believed in 5 years it'd be a mandate. Where does that come from?
Just from the movement, there's no specific reason for that, other than seeing the way the legislature is working each year. It gets closer and closer and closer, and that's the course, and most of the people that are involved in this tend to feel 5 years is just kind of a roundabout number. It could be 6 years, it could be 4 years if something drastic happens. But and it also depends obviously on elections and who is running those bodies as well. I mean, that makes a big difference in what kind of actions are taken.
And you also, I take it you believe that it's an all-encompassing, and that if you're on a barrier island, it'll apply to everybody on the barrier island, no matter what the sea level position is, or is that how you see it?
Yes. I mean, it would be hard to differentiate, and I'm not an engineer or an expert at that point on what could be used, but generally that kind of legislation or that kind of mandate wouldn't have those specifics where you could say your neighbor doesn't have to do it, but you have to do it.
If I may, one more
Sure.
question. And in that there are no the second level of information. For example, if you're a homeowner or it's multi-family, do you see any way that there's a variation or in the law or the dictate that's going to say these have to do this or they have to do that? Is that an all or nothing again?
Once again, it's hard to really answer that because the winds blow different ways all the time. But it is going to be more difficult for the multifamily, more expensive. So there may be a longer transition period given to those kind of things. That's been discussed. And if anything, it may just be the time allowed to get it done. It certainly won't be that someone wouldn't have to do it or would have to do it.
Please.
A few questions. Thank you
Sure.
for your presentation. It's very informative. First question is the mandate. Well, first of all, I mean, your source of information, where is that coming
Just
from?
dealing with the agencies, we are very involved in the legislature, the FDEP, the US EPA, all those things that we deal with these grant programs, with these funding programs, and even with the laws that dictate them. And it just comes from, like I said, there's no specific thing out there that says 5 years. It's just more if that's the movement that's going.
So based on your conversations and what you're hearing, do you think that the current movement, because obviously anything can change at any point in time, that it would be a statewide mandate, or would they say these are the areas where we need to address first? And the reason I ask that is I know in one of the reports that we saw here pointed out that had these regions of impact, and they were all in Central and North Florida, and surprisingly, they were not on the barrier island. So I'm just, any thoughts you have on whether you think how that mandate might come
Yeah, I
about?
do think it will be specific to certain areas. I think that just an all-encompassing mandate over the whole state won't work. It won't be popular, it won't work, it doesn't have that kind of support. I think it will start with the coastal areas, and I think it will include various areas in the central and northern part of the state, just because that's another big push with the springs there and the water sources there to stop that.
And I
And,
was just interested to find that in that state report, which listed the prime areas, we weren't part of it.
And to be honest with you, you have to look at who did the report. That people that are in charge of the committees up there, where are they from, things like that dictate some of those findings.
Like I said, I know, I was surprised.
Yeah.
My last question is more specific. So what are you and your company proposing to do?
Sure.
And what are the services and costs and time frame?
Well, we started discussions with the town, and they wanted us to come here and kind of discuss it with you guys. If the town decides further, we can start looking at those grant opportunities. There's 2 or 3 that will be coming up in the next, I say 12 months, but more like 6 to 8 months, that we could start to go after to get that money to do that next step of planning, that next step of public education. That would be the first action on our part, is we would identify those and say, here are these opportunities, would you like to engage our services to do that, to go after and get the money? We also offer management services after. Generally, it's not discussed till you get the money, and then, at that point, would you like us to administer it? But it is important that a lot of times that we do handle the administration, especially when you have 2 or 3 different funding sources, because it does get complicated with the different agencies. But that would be the next step. And then after that is to determine when the town and the community is ready to really start going after the bigger dollars, to start making those infrastructure changes, infrastructure conversions. And there is no magic grant out there or funding source that's going to give you $15, $20 million in one shot. It's going to have to be a phased process if you want to use grant funding and maximize that grant funding. If you decide to do a large project all at once, we might get $1, $2, $3 million for that. And then the rest is up to the town at that point. But if you have a plan, and that could be part of that initial planning part, how do we best phase it where either the most needed parts, or whatever parts of the community are decided by this committee and that plan, and the town council is important. Those could be now prioritized, and at that point it's just deciding we're ready to move forward, because unfortunately you don't want to go after the funding and get it and then have no action at that point. And that's probably the biggest pitfall to avoid is when you're ready to do those projects, and that's kind of the double-edged sword that we deal with, is people, well, if we get the money, we'll do the project kind of thing. But, it doesn't really work like that. And one thing I expressed to the town in our first meeting is that, they often, because of the demographics of the community, are we in a position to get grant funding? And generally people think no, because of the demographics and the economic situation of the community. And that's not really the case with these kind of grants. They're looking at the environmental aspect, the hazard mitigation aspect. It does help if you're obviously a low income area or something of that nature, but that doesn't play a big enough role to stop you from getting this money. And in the end, I express that, communities that have money to do projects end up getting more grant money because they have better projects and they have the matching funds to do so.
Yeah, can I ask one more question?
Please, continue.
If we go ahead, the commission decides to, go ahead and apply for the grants, and you may have answered this, I may have missed it. If you go ahead and apply for these planning grants to help you decide whether, what the engine, is it vacuum, is it gravity, et cetera, and do all this assessment, at that point, is the community under any obligation to actually put in, make the change, or can they decide after all this, no, not now, we decided we're gonna wait for whatever?
Yeah, not with the grants we would apply for. There are some out there where it's kind of a phase where you would do the first phase of planning, and then they expect, if you do that, to do the second phase. Those we wouldn't be looking at. These would purely be for the planning effort at that point. And you could do the planning and say, this isn't feasible. No one wants to do it, and there's no backup to it or no contingency that you do that work afterwards.
Thank you.
Could I comment on the word planning?
Sure.
I think our community has quite an awareness of the subject matter. Planning, I think, beyond that, becomes a meat and potatoes sort of thing. It's the stage between the awareness and a commitment and actually doing engineering. But we've had some preliminary planning done by Boynton Beach for us. Obviously, we would need more of that. Is that the type of thing that cost effort that could be supported by a grant? And is there a higher correlation of success for the grants with us doing as much of that planning as we can before we submit for a grant?
Yes, to both questions. It is any sort of additional planning, like I said, you have a great basis. A lot of people are looking for the money just to do what Ingenuity did in their report and then build off that. Now comes the part of, and that would be part of the grant process, is to identify the specific scope of work that we'd be going off of. You know, what else besides that report, what is needed, and what does the town want? Do we want to identify individual properties and then work off that? Is it more of an engineering, a preliminary engineering report? Is it, you know, does it involve public education? Does it involve all those things together? That would be the key. But yes, you would apply for that, and then having those, getting the grants, first off, enables you to be known by the agency, because generally most of those kind of planning grants we get are part of agencies that then give out the larger grants to do the work. And if they've already funded a plan or an action type program with that initial money, then they're more likely to fund the larger effort after.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian, thanks. It was a good presentation, actually. I learned a few things. I have a couple of questions. One is, in terms of the timeline between, let's say, a grant gets approved, right? Do you have any sense, in terms of your experience, how long we have until actually a shovel has to go in the ground?
Well, yeah, if you were to apply, say this year you were ready to go. This spring, there's opportunities, you know, to actually get money to do the conversions. And say we did apply in March and April when that comes up, you're looking at early 2021 when you would know about the grant. And then at that point, you have technically 2 years from then to do the work. Generally, it's either a 2 or 3 year period from when you sign the contract for the grant to get the work done. There's always extensions, there's always things you can do. But it's never, hey, you have 6 months. Once you get it, let's get it done.
Thanks.
But if I could just add, sorry, one thing. But also that ability, when you do apply, a lot of it is, are you ready to go? And that's important. If it's, hey, we don't know if this is going to happen, we don't know exactly what we want to do, that comes with that phase of planning to say we can just identify it and move forward. We have all the data.
The other question I have is more esoteric, because we talk about the money, the grant money. And from what I've seen, our research certainly suggests that it's probably in the neighborhood of, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 10% of the total vacant. So let's say a town like this, we decide everybody, communities, single-family homes convert, 1,600 homes, give or take. And it's, let's say, 30 million, right? So what I've seen so far is maybe you can get to 3, right? So is that in the order of magnitude that we can expect, about 10%?
I mean, that's a good number, $3 million. But, you know, if you're talking, and that's where I go to the phasing part of it. If you're going to do it all at once and spend $30 million within a year period or a 2 year period and do it once, that only allows you to go after some of these programs once. Where if you were phasing it, then sometimes you can get a program 1 year, 2 years later, come back and get another one. That allows you to maximize the grant funding.
Got it.
But yes, if you were to do it all in one shot, I think, you know, $3 to $4 million would be if you got that, that would be very good.
And
that would be a good result.
We could tier it.
Yeah. And, you know, there is no percentage really that we look at, because it really, as far as the amount of money it deals with, you know, certain things like the load reductions when you deal with the environmental side of it. If that data is not there, you're not going to get as much money.
Right.
So the need and the environmental impact and the hazard mitigation impact really would play into it. But a good rule, I mean, if I was asked to say how much, if it was a $30 million project, $3 to $4 million in grant money would be a good
We
guess.
are asked by everybody on the street every day,
Yeah.
so that's what
It's hard to, you know, without knowing the actual number, what kind of systems, what's the impact, you know, that fluctuates it. But, you know, I wouldn't say much more than that would be expected.
Okay, that's right.
And that's in total. So it would be in phases. First phase the grant may only be say $500,000, and then another million, then another million, until you, reach the 10%. Is that correct?
Yeah, it could work like that. I think if you were to phase it that way, then you could maybe go another 2 or 3 million up above that. That's what I thought about. If you were, hey, we're going to do this section this year, and then, you know, this section the next year, and break it up in some way like that. That's how most of our larger projects work. I mean, if you do it all at once, you only have one shot at some of these grant programs. But if there are multiple facets or multiple phases, then you can expand that money.
Here's a quick question. If it's mandated, in your experience, how long does it take to actually, does a project start after that point?
It really would be how, generally if they mandate it during the session and they come back, then it's that following year, the law will go into effect, and then another year of rule hearings, another year of, getting everyone. I mean, it'll probably be a couple years after they actually do it.
And you take
before-
about a year to secure the money.
Yeah, the only issue
Approximately.
is, when we talk about preparedness, is once that happens, then everybody's gonna be running to get that
Right.
money.
But you do it in about a year, though, so.
Yeah,
Once-
generally, when you apply, it's between 6 months, 8 months to a year to when you know, and then you can start spending that money.
Thanks.
It's never a quick process with these.
I have a question on the funding. If we identify our own or accumulate our own matching funds, is that advantageous to us, or does that make us less likely to get grants because we should be starting it on our own?
As far as the local share that you would put into the
Yes.
project, the better you're gonna do with the grants. The more local share you have, the higher those projects are gonna rank. That's one of the facets, besides the actual environmental and the public safety. The more money that a community is gonna invest, their local share, their investment in it, is gonna not only score them more points, but, help with all those evaluators. It's a big factor.
Okay. Lisa, I believe.
Yeah, just,
staff
Ryan,
has a
just
question.
your opinion. If the town chooses to go forward with this, and at least on the planning side, would it, in your opinion, would it be more beneficial if the town were the lead, or more beneficial if the utility were the lead?
Excellent.
Good point.
Yeah, it just depends who's gonna have control over the ground, the facilities, and that kind of thing. Generally, it is the town that would be the lead on this. Your utility would be secondary, we can include them as a partner, but the town itself would be the applicant.
Okay.
But would it
Thank
be, would it be received better if it's like, okay, this is the town,
Mhm.
however, part of our plan is that obviously we don't have the plan, so if we went in joint with that governmental entity, would that be a benefit, negative, immaterial?
Any collaboration would help, especially when you bring in the expertise of a utility, obviously as a smaller community. That would be one of the hurdles that we would look at as a smaller community. They would want to see who's going to be administering the project, who's going to give that technical expertise. And in the past, with such other communities like Hypoluxo, we have had that collaboration. And that makes a big difference when they know that there's, a full-time engineering firm or a full-time, utility staff that's there that knows what they're doing, not only in the planning of it, but also who's gonna do the construction administration, who's gonna oversee it besides the consultants that are hired. But it's definitely a positive.
I'd like to make one other comment, because we're talking about grant money, and I think an assumption that I had when the people were talking about mandates was that if the state mandates the conversion, the assumption is that there will be some additional funding hand in hand with that, because 10% to cover the cost of, how big is the project, 25, 30?
30 million?
$30 million.
$30 million.
I'm not sure how well that will go, that's not gonna be received well. But so I think the assumption is, and what I've heard people say is that, so if and when the state mandates it, they're gonna have to provide some funding, just like they did for, Key West or Monroe County. But I just wanted to.
If I can comment on that. I think they definitely will, and that's why we talk about that movement going, because each year there's more and more bills introduced. Each year, last year, there was a whole new septic-to-sewer conversion program that made it to the very end of the budget session, but didn't make it into the final budget to provide $50 million for communities to start doing those things. So each year it gets closer and closer, and yes, I believe they won't provide, a majority of the money to get that done. But if they do mandate it, they're gonna have to provide other opportunities or increased opportunities through the programs they have.
Another question? I take it the contract is between, is with the town, not with the individual homeowner. However, this project, if you look at some of the research we've done, the $30 million is infrastructure, but then there's a hookup charge, which could be another $10 to $15 million of homeowner cost. Where does that fit into this grant scheme?
And that allows you to kind of divide those into two different pieces. The infrastructure will be the town applying, the town doing the work. The connection charges can be used for some of these funding sources we do. We did that exact thing in Hypoluxo on the water there many years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, where the town. We got a grant for the town, and it didn't pay for all the connections, but it basically took the connection in half, the cost for the connection in half of what it was. It was like $800,000 total. We got a $400,000 grant. The town put that in as their share, and then the residents absorbed the rest. So that is an opportunity. You know, as you move forward, it is going to be deciding which grants to go after, because sometimes you can only go after one project through one program. So, and that's part of phasing it. Maybe you do the infrastructure one year, and then you come back and apply for a large section of hookups the next year. And that's how you could, you know, benefit the residents as well as.
You know that, you talked about educating the public. Well, their first question out of their mouth is, how much?
Yeah, and that's been a common question for many years is we have, you know, communities, where do I get the money to pay for the septic conversion? Well, we can get you a little, but we can't get you all of it. So unless, you know, unless everyone's on board, it becomes an uphill battle.
Any others? Staff have any questions? Wayne?
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
That was
coming.
great, thank you.
Okay, I'd also like to welcome this morning a presentation from John Radnoff from Flowvac. They're one of the largest suppliers and implementers of vacuum systems, actually worldwide, not only in the U.S. And John is very familiar with our system and its requirements, because he worked with Boynton Beach on their proposal to us. So I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Radnoff.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Neil. Really good to be here. I've been through the town a number of times. You'll hear from the accent that I'm not from around here. I'm from Australia, and I flew in night before last. I'm based in Sydney, and I run the global business of Flowvac. Plus, I'm also the major shareholder of Flowvac. We've been running for 20 years doing vacuum sewage systems, and for 20 years before that, we've been involved in vacuum sewage systems in various ways. In the US, there are 2 different companies doing vacuum sewage systems. We've just started a few years ago. We've been mainly focused as being a global business. You've got a company up in Rochester in Indiana, Airvac, and they've done nearly all of the projects in the USA. We've done no projects in the USA. We've done technical assistance with a lot of people, but we're a relative newcomer to this market. The good thing is that means that you're going to have 2 different inputs into your process. We come with different experiences, and the reason we've been involved here is Joe Pataniti. I met a few years ago and has worked with us on looking at a few different projects up and down the coast, because we have different experience in what we do. We've got much more experience in the higher flows that you tend to have with your condominiums, on dealing with a lot of newer technology, a lot of ways of dealing with things, of monitoring the systems. So it's just a different expertise, because we're an engineering firm that we base it on solutions being solved instead of just a product as a sale. So you will have opportunities to hear different things about what we do and how vacuum works. And having been involved in these projects, we've done about 400 projects which have been sewer conversion, septic conversion systems, and a lot of new development projects. We've set up standards in a lot of countries. We've been on the standards committees, and we've I've done meetings with the FDP here and USDA up in Washington, and next week I'll be back in Tallahassee with the FDP looking at the programs and how they're rolling them out and the funding, because we're looking at the funding aspects on giving a benefit if you're going to use a vacuum sewage system, because there are environmental benefits that they see in using that. So I'm going to be here all this afternoon and tomorrow, so if there's other questions you want to sit down and go through the actual engineering side, or go out looking at the projects, then I'm happy to spend whatever time you need. Michael Pringle, who runs the US operation, we've set up the operation for North and South America just up the coast here in Palm Coast, so Florida is the head office for all of the Americas. and we're setting up production facilities there at the moment. So all the production will be as close to here as possible, which provides the operational support. So the operations base is there, so that again gives you good support locally. Michael's at the moment rolling out a project in Oregon, so he's not here this week, but I'll be catching up with him with the FDP next week. Neil had mentioned that there's been a few articles in the last few months about what's been happening here with the septic conversions, and some of the information's what we see time and time again all around the world. We're having conversations with a lot of different people about the rising sea levels or impacts on septic tanks, and I've just been hopefully early next week back with the North Miami Beach people about the problems they've been having with the rising waters and with the Fort Lauderdale people. You've been looking at this for a while on the conversion aspects and the impact that has. We started working with Joe on this about 3 years ago. He sent us the drawings and we started doing some aspect, and that was with their consultants, AECOM. So we weren't involved with Ingenuity on the process they did for you. I haven't seen that report. I saw some of the overall plans online for that, but I think it was all fairly similar to what AECOM were looking at. The mayor, I understand here in Manaplan down the road, was also talking about the painful conversion, and a lot of these things aren't that painful now. Certainly if it's a vacuum sewer system, you've done enough of these projects and so have AirVac to know how to do it and how important the community consultation is, how you keep people happy and not too disgruntled with you. Feel free through it if you want to ask questions. If I go on to something technical and you'd like to ask a bit more, then please do. This is Miami Beach, I think, where you get those floodwaters, but nearly all the vacuum systems we've done around the world are in coastal areas. They're in areas where you have flooding. So this is our normal territory. We're always in the worst ground conditions that you could possibly have. They're in marshes, they're in earthquake areas, really hard rock. I'm in Hawaii week after next because they've got issues. I was at the Big Island last year on how you get through the volcanic rock. So we're always in these bad areas. So we're used to this. I'm going to have water from time to time because we've got massive bushfires. I don't know if you've seen in the news in Australia at the moment. And so our houses have just been surrounded by smoke. So excuse me for grabbing water from time to time. The slide on the top left is one of our coastal suburbs where every 2 years we have floods. Just very normal. We've had a vacuum system sitting there for 40 years now. We maintained it for 20 years for the utility, and we actually had part of the contract that if a homeowner wasn't able to use the facilities in the home, we'd have to put them up in a hotel, and we never had to do that in the whole period. Because vacuum systems can operate underwater. In the standards that we've established, you have to be able to operate a system under 6 foot of water. So it works underwater, the tight systems. The slide on the right's in an area which gets hit by hurricanes. You can see a creek there. What we've set up is an automated system that cuts off the system. All the homes on the right-hand side, they go underwater whenever the hurricane comes through, and the left side, they keep on going. So you don't want a system which if part of the town goes under on a regular basis, you don't want that means everyone's system's collapsed. So we could figure out ways to be able to manage these systems from an engineering basis of how the whole area keeps on managing to have a sewer system without it being closed down or inundated with too much stormwater. We're doing a lot of projects like this one in Spain, where the old gravity system, so it's a 50-year-old gravity system, is just the pipes have gotten weaker. Every time you got a high tide, salt water was getting into the system, that kills the treatment plant, and so they finally changed that over to a vacuum system. So we've retrofitted the old gravity system there with a newer vacuum system. So like you've got, it's got condominiums, it's got hotels, it's got a lot of shops and restaurants. And because we've got flexible pipe work, we can go under and around other things which we're finding in the ground. So we could replace that old gravity system, leaving some of the old pipes in the ground still. This is the conversations we'll have with Fort Lauderdale next week about their system. You've got pipes there, an old gravity system which is broken down. To keep on trying to repair that is really impossible. In a gravity system, you can't tell where that infiltration is really occurring. With a vacuum system, you can. So we'll be able to come up with a resolution for them. One of the biggest difficulties we have when we're talking to communities is getting communities on board with actually the idea that their septic tanks cause damage and they need to replace them at some stage, because many people say, oh, we've just got a new one and there's no problem at all. We've done a lot of work in Auckland in New Zealand. For those who've been to New Zealand, you'll know it's a very pristine, beautiful place, and but they were having issues in their main city, which is Auckland, where they had to develop this thing called Safe Swim program, because they were getting, whenever it rained, a lot of the beaches needing to be closed because they were getting sewage overflows coming into the water. And people weren't believing that was because of their septic tanks. So they have this program where they do daily testing, and they have this Safe Swim application. But they had to hire a consulting engineer. Catherine, you were able to hit play on that video?
I had to take it out of SlideMaster to do it.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. So they had a consultant. This is called a poo tracker that they set up. You can see that online on YouTube if you want to, called the poo tracker. And it shows the Enterocoque entering the water. So you're seeing a rain event occurring, and you're seeing the different colours and levels of the human feces entering the waterways where people were swimming, and showing the impact of a wet weather event when on the waterways, and why they were having to put up don't swim there. So that managed to get the community on board of going, okay, we can see there's a problem. Let's do something about that. So we're doing a lot of areas in Auckland right now. One of the areas we did was Cow Bay, which is on the coastal area there. And for 20, 30 years now, they'd had signs up saying, you know, you're not allowed to take any of the shellfish out of the beach, you're not allowed to swim here. So it's a beautiful little cove with, it's about 280 houses. It's only a small little area. But having that sign up there all the time was shocking. So we replaced their septic tank system with a vacuum sewer. Now that sign's gone. They're doing daily testing there, and you can see on it that Cow Bay is perfect for swimming, fishing, and boating. It's a daily monitored test there. So it's been tremendous success. The utility and the council won environmental awards for doing the work, so did the engineering firm doing the work. And we've now been putting in monitoring systems throughout it. Because it's seasonal, they want to be able to manage the system when you don't have very many people there in winter and lots of people there in summer. And the other project which they're doing with this at the moment is putting it all on solar. So they bought these Tesla batteries, they put that outside the station, and by mid this year, the whole system will be completely on solar. Yeah.
I'm just curious, who paid for that?
The system or the solar?
System and solar.
Yeah, it was exactly the same as here. First up, it was the town in Auckland, the water care, because it's postage stamp, they've got a lot of systems, so they just raise everyone's 1 cent, and that pays for the scheme, so it's a little bit easier than what you've got.
Thank you.
Yeah. The homeowners have to pay for their connection and things like that. The same
Absorbed by the entire utility system.
Oh, it's it's kind of different.
Okay.
We do plenty just like yours too, but yeah, no, it's certainly that way. The good thing is here on this going to a solar, because I noticed over the road here you've got solar panels all over the park, is that there is FDEP funding at the moment for solar initiatives, that if you wanted to do something with solar on here, the community likes that, then that's something which is an opportunity for you. Vacuum systems have been used for 40 years, late 60s, early 70s, we've been using vacuum sewage systems around the world. There's about 300 systems in the US. Florida's got the most. I think it's 65 systems in Florida with all the Florida Keys, a lot of the Florida Keys, the other side, the Sarasota, Inglewood area, Panhandle. I think I've visited most of them. Unfortunately, the systems aren't mine, but we've done a lot of work with all the utilities in a lot of these areas. Up in Jacksonville, we've been spending a lot of time helping them out, working with them. Systems are resilient. They're made for hurricane areas. They're made for bad conditions. So you've got to expect sometimes these systems struggle a little bit, but any system would, because you're in an environment which is a very difficult environment. They tend to be lower cost than gravity systems in these areas that we're talking about, and I'll go through some numbers for you, but they tend to be cheaper because you're not having to go deep with your infrastructure, your pipe work and dewater and have lots of pumps and equipment. The systems we use tends to all be in the public domain, so it's not on private lots. So you have a single pump station looking after a broad area. So an area like here on the plans that we've done would involve a single pump station, and I'll show you what pump stations look like and why that would work here. But in areas like Key Largo, which is 12,000 connections, and that's got 6 pump stations. So you look at your catchment areas to how many stations you want. But those stations can cover quite big areas. From a single station, you can go out to 3 miles away on any direction. So you can cover big areas, depending on the size of the flows. The collection pits are on the side of the street, so you've just got normal gravity coming from a house to a collection pit. You don't have that collection pit sitting on someone's house. There's no power required at that collection pit. It's just pneumatic, and the pipe work in the ground is all shallow, and sits at 3 to 5 feet. So this is what it looks like from the house. So this is from a normal residence. So I'm not talking about your condominiums. So you've got a house, you've got a line, your normal gravity feed coming from the house down to the property boundary here, and the collection pit sits in the ground outside that property boundary. It's just a gravity flow into the bottom of that collection pit. We'd usually have, in a lot of places, 3 to 4 houses coming into one of those collection pits out in the street. So it'd come out of your property down to your property boundary. You'd have a connection point at the property boundary. Usually on a lot of funded schemes, the town would pay for that up to that connection point, and the homeowner would have to pay for getting rid of the septic tank and doing the gravity line up to that property boundary. In some funded communities here, I've seen that the town prefers to look after the gravity in the person's property as well, because otherwise they're not going to get people to sign up to the scheme. So they have all that out, but that tends to be in more lower economic type communities. There's a small vent you can see next to the property boundary there, and that's for air. So the thing when the valve is firing and it's taking the sewage away, it also takes air. So it's an airborne system that it takes. So that air comes from somewhere. We don't want to affect the homeowner. We want to have all infrastructure out in the public area, not on people's land. You don't want utility or your operators going onto people's property at any time. So this is how the connection looks if we've got 3 properties to one of those collection pits. So you'd have it coming from the house where you've got an inspection point, then into that gravity line where it gravitates into the collection pit, down to the bottom of the collection pit, and then from that pit it goes out to a pipe which goes into the vacuum main, which is down. Usually you'd have it down the sidewalk, down the side of the road. That might not be the best location, might be the side of the road's a better location here, but that's something which will work out with the surveys with your local engineers. I've seen, certainly in some communities here, they don't want it on the sidewalk because people's driveways go all the way up to the sidewalk and they don't want them ripped up as you go, so we quite often will put it down the side of the road instead.
So there is a possibility that on a road like A1A, where the parts that we do have sidewalk, we could actually put the infrastructure under the sidewalk and not impact the road itself?
That'd be ideal. That's a much better location for us to do it.
There's a sufficient right-of-way. We'd be okay. There's sufficient right-of-way in A1A. We might be on the other side of the street even. The sidewalk's on one side.
But there is a possibility that we wouldn't be impacting the highways, what you're
Correct.
saying.
We would
I mean,
in this
that's a
case, we would propose that we do not go near the edge of pavement. That we could take care of it, hopefully, if there's sufficient room and we don't have a lot of conflicts, we would take care of it in the grass area.
I mean, that's important for the public to know that this type of system has very limited impact compared to a gravity system that would tear up the road.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and
Well,
that could be for a number of months.
The gravity system would have a force main down A1A, so it would be the same on A1A.
Okay?
Okay, but a gravity system in the smaller roads, local roads, yes, because it's gravity. So the roads would be compromised.
Lisa, you'd have the
Do
same.
you know what I'm saying?
You'd have the same force main, you'd have a large pipe regardless of whether it's gravity or vacuum. It's how
Correct.
it's-
The
so-
main line is still gonna be the same, have it probably close to the same buried depth,
Right.
down A1A.
Would
The
you mean
main,
on the road?
The
then?
main-
You couldn't do it on the right side of the street?
the main road, yeah, we could do it on the side of the street.
Right, so even
Yeah.
on the footpath, on the
Yeah, I mean,
sidewalk, you could do it. So you
but I'm
wouldn't
saying
need-
it's the same, because we've talked about gravity systems and we've
Yep,
talked about
sure.
vacuum systems.
Yeah,
So on the local roads,
yeah.
if you had a vacuum system,
Mhm.
because it's all under pressure at the property line in the right of way, it's less of an impact on the local roads, our roads. If you, on A1A, it'll be the same, because it's gonna be a pressure pipe no matter what. It's not gonna be a gravity pipe either way. It's gonna be under pressure, and under pressure, you have pretty close, you'll have the same bury depth, and we won't be tearing up A1A.
What about the pumping stations on a gravity system that incrementally have to go down the line every time you're staging the?
Right, so conceptually, there would be lift stations, like
Correct.
we have them now, lift stations. And those lift stations will probably be at the end of the subdivision, right, at A1A. And then once you leave the lift station, it's force main, which is the same
Okay.
as theirs.
You're discussing a gravity system
I'm-
layout,
Just-
not a vacuum flow layout.
Well, I'm just saying, the impact
comparing
to,
the
we're
two.
talking about impact to a road, so the impact to A1A would probably be the same. The impact to your smaller local roads would be different, and that's where a vacuum system would be less invasive than a gravity system.
Okay.
So
We have one main road.
Yeah, no,
That's a
I
state
thought maybe
road.
this vacuum main that we're looking at here, that could be on the sidewalk, because when I drove down on the sidewalk, it seemed like there was enough room to put that there rather than have no impact on the road.
Along the main road.
On the main road, it would be on
Yeah.
the sidewalk, not on the road, not on the
Correct.
road. So
Or
you
in
wouldn't
the
need to
grass.
dig up the road.
Or in the grass, if we
Yeah,
can get
yeah,
it in
yeah.
the grass,
So
we'll put it in the
how big
grass.
would you, what
Yeah.
size is your vacuum main versus a gravity system force main? Are you a 5-inch pipe versus a
This would be about,
It
most of
depends.
yours would be 6 and 8 inch.
6 and 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
have
that's
a-
comparable.
A little
It's
bit
comparable.
10.
This is
Sure, I
comparable,
understand.
yeah.
This is a little bit of a technical question. Your map up there shows you these hookups. You
Yep.
said it could go up, one plant could go up to 3 miles.
Yep.
How does that maintain that pressure from the furthest end all the way to the plant? How does it keep on having that much vacuum pull to
Yeah.
get there without any repeater of some sort?
Yeah, it's just because it's a closed network, because we don't, that pipe, once you've filled it up with negative pressure, then it is sealed, it's closed. Nothing's coming out, there's no holes in it, and so it can maintain that. So part of the commissioning process is when we set it up and we'll put that pipe in the ground and you ramp up the pressure to, 20 inches of mercury you have here is the pressure, then, and you seal it, you have to hold that pressure for 3 hours without it dropping at all, and it does. And so once you have some sewage coming in with air, that starts depleting it. And so these are big enough systems that you have that happening quite a few times before it depletes enough for a vacuum pump to turn on at the station, put the pressure back up to that 20 inches, and then you'll have sewage coming in, that depletes it down to 16 inches, the pumps turn on, takes it back up to 20. So the pumps only turn on for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, so they'll turn on a number of times during peak period to maintain the pressure in the pipe, but it's a sealed pipe.
And so it doesn't matter the volume that comes from any specific location. It's because in some cases you got a homeowner, which is going to be very low, where you've got a treatment plant that's doing 65,000 gallons a day. So it doesn't matter when that's dumping into there, it just,
That's how we engineer it. So if you have too much liquid coming to a single point, and I've got some examples of it, then that can deplete the vacuum pressure down, because you've got a lot of air coming to a point, and it's air that's going to deplete. Water and air will deplete the vacuum pressure. So if you have it too much coming into one particular point, you're depleting vacuum from down the line.
right.
So what we need to organise is that the flow coming in is then if you've got a very large flow coming in, we'll have lines coming up to inject a little bit up there, a little bit here, a little bit here, so that you're not putting it all in one point.
So
So
you-
we'll try and
So
engineer
you
that.
have parallel lines, okay, that basically create the negative pressure.
We could have double, we could have two lines on both of these roads here going north and south of the pump station. You would have, I think, two lines going north, two lines going south, to cover your 1.8 miles. I think so, and so you'd try and...
I have a lot of other questions, but this isn't the time.
That's all right, we're gonna get to a lot of those. One of the important considerations we have when we're doing our design, so we'll look at an area, this is in a new development that I've got on the screen here, which isn't what you've got, but a new housing development. So we'll break it up into stages and we'll do different areas in one bit. So the bit in blue in the middle is the section we're focused on there on the design. And so we'll look at the individual collection pits. So on the left where it says manhole, that's collection pits. That was their vernacular there. The number of houses coming into each collection pit. The flow rate, now this is in Australia, so it's litres a second, not gallons per minute. The gravity volume, so how much volume is in the pipes, because one of the key things we look at is emergency storage. So part of the standards in Europe that we established and in Asia was that we should have 4 hours emergency storage, between 4 and 6 hours emergency storage in collection pits and in that incoming gravity line, so that we, if there was, the pump station got knocked out or the force main was out or something happened, we've got time to be able to get either a sucker truck out there or a backup generator or some other equipment there before, all of a sudden we had sewage flowing over the road, which would be the last thing we'd want, more into people's homes. So we line up by pit what the emergency storage is, and this is how we determine how many collection pits we need. So rather than saying, okay, we're going to have 1 pit per house or per 2 houses or per 3, what we look at is the flow coming out of that. So if we've got a condominium, which has got a high flow rate, maybe it's got 20 units in it, then we're going to calculate out, well, what is the actual flow there coming out? How many pits do we need there? What's the emergency storage size? We want to try and keep our pits all fairly standard. So and our depth all fairly standard, it makes it a lot cheaper cost throughout the whole network. So if we can look at then what storage amount we need as emergency storage, then we've got a finite number. We can say, so if someone wants to get rid of their house and put a 5-story apartment up there, then at least we know, okay, you're going to need an extra pit or an extra 2 pits, or this condo we're going to need 5 pits. We're going to have some basis for a decision on, can they go and do this development or not? Because I've noticed up in North Carolina, they actually banned new additions to the system saying, well, it was too much, or they just say, oh, just put in an extra pit without any real thought process about, well, why? There are 2 overriding parts of the decision. One is emergency storage, and the other is depth. Because the whole goal here in a community like this is to keep everything as shallow as possible, so you're not impacting on the water table and dewatering and everything else you've got very close to the surface. So this is one of the parts that we go through with the engineers, local engineers, to the design. So the collection pit itself that we have as standard, we have 2 standard sizes, a 6-foot and an 8-foot collection pit. So you have normal gravity, as I said, coming into the bottom of the collection pit, and we've got a vacuum valve which sits above a floor, sitting at the top of the collection pit. The floor keeps the sewage from being where the operators are or where the valve is. So, and that also keeps the odors away from the top, so we don't have odors coming out at any collection pit points. It's all pneumatic there, there's no electricity. All you've got is 2 pipes coming into the bottom of that collection pit. One is the suction pipe that's taking the sewer out of the pit and into the vacuum main. The other is just an empty piece of PVC pipe that's detecting water pressure. So once you get 10 gallons coming into the bottom of that collection pit, then that's just compressing the air in that to the controller which sits on the top of the green valve. So a small little diaphragm there flicks over and says, okay, you've got 10 gallons in there now, you need to open up. So it'll take pressure from the vacuum side of the valve up to the top, take that spring up, you can see in the top video, the spring's going up and down, so that spring is going up once it comes under vacuum pressure, and then it releases under air. So we might have a timer on that to say we want 4 seconds of air or 2 seconds of air. So once a liquid goes up, it's then being followed by air, and we control how much air that comes in. So if it's a long way away from the station, we might want 8 seconds of air coming in. If it's very close to the station, we only want 2 seconds of air, because it's air which is actually the motive force that's pushing all of this sewage along the line. So the very old days, back in the 60s, 70s, we developed these as siphon systems. So it'll take a slug of liquid and siphon it through the pipe in a very slow way. This type of process is really fast. It's traveling at 15 foot a second. And you can see from the vacuum valve there, that's designed for a 50-year life. And there's only a few components in there that get replaced every 10 years. And the parts replacements are under $100 every 10 years. So there's no electrical components there. There's no big heavy equipment that you need to lift out. And I'll show you how the operator deals with that in a second. But you can sort of see when the water's going up. Let's stop going up. I know. So when that goes up and into where the valve has stopped going. See if we can get the valve going. When the valve's going, you can sort of see the water going up as blue, and then you can see it being white. So that's the air going through. So that valve is never actually closing on any water. It's always closing on air. So it's not getting caught on anything because of the amount of air going through. It's able to keep things moving. This is it's going to start automatically. This is a part of the standards, again, in the rest of the world. The US doesn't have a standard. In part of the WEF guide, there is a section on vacuum sewers, and there's a suggested standard in there, which we just need to tweak and get ratified as more of a standard. There's a Florida code for vacuum sewers, and part of the standards and part of the WEF book talks about a blockage test. So we have to have a independent authority come and look at a whole list of things which they could put into the sewer that people put in, and each firing of the valve, each time the valve takes 10 gallons, it needs to be able to take whatever's in the collection pit up into the system. So we spent a day on doing this with the consultant. We also talk to operators around the world about other things which they're seeing coming into the sewers.
It's amazing.
Wet wipes was a big problem for a lot of utilities, especially in the gravity systems. So for your communities which are on their own little private pump station, I'm sure they're having a lot of problems with fat grease with those wet wipes getting caught in them. It's a real problem for the gravity systems. For us, it's not a problem. You know, we have these taking solid waste. We have them doing fats and grease in restaurants. So we know these aren't impacted. So we don't get blockages in these systems. If you can fit down the home line, it'll go through our vacuum valve, and it doesn't then get caught in the vacuum main because the velocity of it going through the valve at 15 to 18 foot a second is such that it's taking along to our pump station. The pump station goes into the collection tank, and then from the collection tank out to the treatment plant, and they've got screens at the treatment plant to deal with any objects, but it won't get caught along the way. So we don't ever get things caught in the vacuum mains. And if it's a large, unusual object, we used to get McDonald's used to have toys which would get caught. They'd be odd shapes and they'd get caught in the valve. But the process then this is an operator doing a repair on a valve. This is how easy it is then for him to do that. So if he did get an object caught in it, this is his process for doing it. This is also the process of what the operator needs to do every 10 years to do all of the parts replacements required. Now, we've got health and safety regulations in a lot of countries which don't apply. Yep.
So there's the talk about how many homes you put on one of those valves.
Yep.
So this, if that's what would be on everybody's property owner if there was one per home?
One per 3 homes. If you had one per home, this would be outside the property boundary, so this would be out in the public area, not on the property.
But it would be, in essence, it would be a manhole.
Manhole. It's a standard manhole cover. Yeah, that's all it
You
looks
see
like.
lots of them on a residential street.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Does your company maintain these?
We do maintain them, but Boynton, or your local operator or Boynton Beach would do the maintenance.
But Boynton's not overly aware of these right now, right?
No, but they're keen to be. Yeah, and the meetings I've had, I can show you some reasons why they're keen to look at it, because there's a few areas they're looking at.
But they haven't up to this point. So
No.
you'd have to train down.
But we could certainly do it. We've got an operations group, and we maintain them around the world. Our group in Germany looks after just over 100 systems with 14 people, because we have everything monitored.
Right.
All of our collection pits all have monitored. They can say how many times it fires, how many you know, if it's going to be a potential overflow, what's going on in the system. We know exactly what's going on in the whole network. If we're getting infiltration going on,
So you could do it if Wayne didn't want to do it?
yes, we could. Yes.
So, back to that monitoring system, is that, battery operated, is it
It's
Wi-Fi?
battery offered. It's It's using a LoRa network, which is a free base off 915. So usually using that for a lot of community type
Okay.
equipment. A lot of other information can go through that. But I've got pictures and pretty pictures of the monitoring. I've got live stuff I can show you later of the things going on there. But this has taken the operator 3 minutes to do all of the work required on that valve. So every 10 years, that's all that's required. Not touching sewage, is, you know, taking the top of the valve out, that's all the components. So changing some parts every 10 years, that's the work that's needed. The pipe work is, you know, this is why vacuum's used in a lot of these sort of communities, because it's shallow in the ground, it's narrow trenches, it's small diameter pipe. The older picture on the right is from an area close to my house. It's in Palm Beach. It's the most expensive suburb in Australia, and for gravity pipe they were looking at was going to close off their single main road down the street there for something like 6 months, which they weren't very happy about. So vacuum sewer, we're laying the pipe here, they can still go in and out of their driveways. But also, once you've laid pipe, once you've done, you know, a couple hundred feet as a contractor during the day, you close up that trench at night. That's closed up. It's not, you know, because they've laid the pipe. There's a daily test, so at the end we'll plug the line, we'll put a little vacuum pump onto that line, make sure that it's tight, that the joints are all tight, and that means the contractor can then fill it, you know, cover in the trench and fill that in and move on to the next section. So at any one time there's only small sections needing to be done, and people can still get in and out of their homes, or people can still use the businesses if they're on that street. I went to one in Taiwan 2 years ago now, where they were going to close down the main street in this town. It was 250,000 people, and they were going to close it down for 10 years to be able to lay a 30, 40-foot pipe in the ground. It was just crazy. Where, yeah, we can do this on the side of the road, we're not dewatering, and the important thing is, especially in towns like this, we're always going to run into things which we didn't think of, which weren't in the survey, which, you know, some new cable equipment's gone in there, some new cable, some new pipe, an old pipe that needs to be there. So with vacuum, we can go under that or over it or around it without really holding up the construction, because when we're doing projects in Europe, we're running into unexploded mines, we're running into archaeological stuff in Greece, we're running into architectural, important things. So we're always running into things. As a contractor, the last thing you want is then hold up the process for 3 months while someone inspects all that, and then you can build again. So if we can have, an inspector there, just when it goes, the local inspector says, okay, we can just go around that one, and that's fine, or under it. So that makes it very easy. Now, in the US, nearly all the projects have been done using PVC pipe, so it's quite thick pressure-rated PVC. Internationally, I think we use PE pipe, HDPE pipe a lot more. I'm not sure why HDPE pipe hasn't been used here a lot. I think there were some bad experiences in the water industry at some point, or the cost difference, but I know when we're dealing in marshy ground, HDPE gives us a little more flexibility. It's a little easier. I think a lot of people are moving towards that now. Yeah. So anyway, don't be told you can't use it, because we use it all the time in a lot of areas, and it might end up being cheaper with contractors in some of your ground area. I was down we're doing a lot of work down with the marathon people and with Key Largo, and I saw a vacuum getting put in the ground there. I don't know if the video won't work. Anyway, just saw them laying vacuum mains at the side of the street there. So for them, that was them cutting the coffee rock, just a small little digger going down the side of the road. That's Highway 1, so it's a fairly main road, and they're just going down the side of the road. It wasn't impacting on traffic at all. It's not taking up a lot of space. That was on, and that grass verge on the side of Highway 1. Going under Highway 1, the contractor contacted me about that, because he was wanting to use PE pipe to go under. So pulling PE pipe was a lot easier for him than using PVC. The pump stations, always a big variety over what's required. This one, we always go through a 3D drawing first, so we can do walkthroughs and see what the hazards are. In a lot of areas, we're dealing with health and safety regulations again to impact. probably won't be your concern as much, but it's always good to have something which doesn't hit the front pages of someone getting injured. This is one covers a system for 3,000 houses, so it's quite large, so don't be frightened by the size of that one. But the systems tend to have a collection tank. Nowadays, you're pretty much going to see stainless steel tanks. They used to be mild steel with two-coat epoxy paint on them. Now you're seeing far more stainless steel. There have been some failures of mild steel here, and even fiberglass is being used. I've noticed in a few towns. I'm not very comfortable with fiberglass at all, but stainless steel in these communities, I think, is probably the better option for the collection tank. That one's got 6 vacuum mains coming into it. The reason why it's 2 stories there is that vacuum mains are coming in under the street. They're coming in at 3 to 5 feet in the ground, say 5 feet deep. You really want them coming straight into the tank. You don't really want them coming, up 10 feet out of the ground, because we've got a real limitation about how far we can lift with vacuum. So if we can have it come through, that gives us a lot more energy and a lot more protection in the system, that we're not going to run out of vacuum if there's a lot going on. So we've done a lot of small systems where we just sit it on top of the ground, but that might be a system, half mile long type system, not something, a mile, a couple of miles long. So down the bottom it has sewage pumps, and those sewage pumps are always sized for going where the utility wants them. So from my understanding is you're going to want it to go over to the treatment plant, which is over the other side of the intercoastal. So you would have a single force main going from this station across the waterways to that treatment plant. So you wouldn't need 2, you just need 1 coming from this station, and those sewage pumps are sized for that. So it doesn't need to go to another pump station and then over. So it's just this, all of your equipment's in this one building. Up the top, you've got, on that particular one, 3 vacuum pumps. Your size is probably, I'd say you probably have 3 vacuum pumps as well, and you've got control panels. So we tend to have the vacuum pumps and control panel sitting on the top floor, because if you get a major flood event, then you don't want them sitting down in the water. The sewage pumps can handle that, and the collection tank can handle that. Vacuum pumps don't really like water and do the control panels.
So in normal design, you would put the tanks underground and the vacuum pumps above ground?
The vacuum pumps above ground, that's right. Yep. Yeah, pretty much always.
What's the size?
Oh, that's a noise. We don't need a noise. Well, that one was for 3,000 houses. This smaller one in this picture is about, a 300, 400 house type project.
And the big one was, how big was the building?
3,000. The building size would have been 60 foot by 30 foot.
Big building.
Yeah, that was big. We don't need that big. Like this one's in Portugal, and this looks after reasonable size, and you can see it's just a wooden shack, just fits into the side of the beach there. This one, they've got restaurants and bars all down the beach, and they turn it on every summer, and they have all the bars and facilities there. So that just blends in with the local community. You try and have whatever pump station you've got blend in with the ideas of it. I drove through, this isn't one of ours, this is at Provincetown up in Massachusetts. So this is their vacuum station, is just this little building there. It's got windows on it, just people sit in front of it. You wouldn't have a clue it's a pump station. It doesn't have noise. It's, it just looks, it doesn't have smell. They don't have odors. You can keep the noise contained, so no one would have a clue. This one looks a bit more like a pump station, but this is a lot cheaper. This is a much cheaper building to have. You've got to have, to code here, you've got to have it hurricane proof, so we've got to be able to think about that. And this is just industrial, which if you're going to have it in a hidden lot and have big trees around it, then why spend the money on a beautiful building? This one's more beautiful. This is a golf course resort. Yeah.
I just have to ask this question. So that the tanks are underground,
Yep.
but you obviously need access to them?
Yeah.
Can we do that here? Do we have enough depth? Okay.
Well, it would be underwater, but it's contained.
Yeah, you just do a caisson
We can
type.
engineer that.
Okay.
It's gonna be engineered,
Just ask. Because, I didn't want to have another, municipal underground swimming pool.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty important.
Another movie time.
Yeah. No, we use quite often with the very wet things, we'll just do a caisson type design. Yeah, the engineers will figure that out. So this golf course resort, again, just windows, and looks like it's just another resort house, so you just have it to fit in. you know, when I was over at the park this morning, these buildings over here, all of them could look like pump stations. You know, you just design it to look exactly the same way, couldn't you? That's not.
I think there's space right out there.
Have it look just like this. In Europe, they tend to use the local community to paint up their stations a lot. So this one's in Holland, and the ones in Germany are the same. They look, you know, it's good to engage the community in something like that if it's going to be on public display. See, this is ones which are above ground. So the deployable systems that we use, we've done a lot with the military in Afghanistan, where we use containerized pump stations. So we'll put the pump station in a 20-foot container. We lay the pipe work on top of the ground when we're doing camp-type situations, so we can redeploy, take everything with us instead of leaving pipe underground. We don't need power out through utility. This one was the one on the left was the Spanish Air Force we were putting it out to, but for emergency, we've spoken with FEMA after the hurricanes here before about having a few of these available for some of the systems, being able to throw out a container, be able to look after temporary shelters. But we also use it for developers. A developer doesn't want to have to spend, you know, $500,000 on big pump station equipment when they're just selling their first 10, 20 houses. So we can do at least just a small little containerized pump station to them. That looks after until they've got the first 100 houses down, and then we can build more larger infrastructure. So the big costs, well, it's capital costs, operational costs, environmental impacts, any other risks, and impact on residents, which are the key critical parts that you think about. So the capital cost, it's the equipment. So for you, it's the pump station. So if we can get away with a single pump station rather than two stations, which I think was in one of the concepts, then that should save you a block of land, should save you having two lots of generators, two lots of buildings. And I think this can be easily done with one building. How long contractors are on site is a big factor too, especially if you're closing off parts of the road. And that's the risk of accidents. Treatment plant cost, when you're designing vacuum systems, we design it without infiltration. We don't, you know, we talked about the tightness in a vacuum system. If you had a leak in a vacuum main, you would know about it because the vacuum pumps would have to run longer to keep up the vacuum pressure. You get an alarm that the vacuum pumps are running longer than 30 minutes. You would then, the operator would go and check and find out where the problem was in the line, if there was a leak somewhere. Maybe, and the only times I really see it is with telecommunications contractors come and, you know, dug up the wrong place and cut through the pipe. The good thing is when they cut through a vacuum main, it's sucking in. It's not a surcharge. It's not like a force main where you've got sewage going up the sky. It's a negative pressure, so it actually sucks in. So you get a little bit of dirt around the hole sucking into the pipe, and then it's just air that's coming in. So that air is depleting the vacuum of the station. Now usually the systems are robust enough that that's not going to affect the other 3 lines that we've got out there. We've got 1 line which is being affected. People can still go to the, you know, the restrooms, use the showers, whatever, and all the other areas won't be affected. And the operator will be able to find this easily because we've got division valves along the line. We can identify which line we can go along. We can see where that problem is and we fix it. So you're only going down, you know, 5 feet to fix a break in a main. That's repaired. You're back to normal. That's all happened within a couple of hours. And that means the next time it rains, rainwater isn't going into, stormwater's not going into a hole in a pipe. It's going where it should do. And you're not getting, your pump station isn't, and treatment plant aren't getting inundated with stormwater every time it rains. So when you're negotiating with the treatment plant people over how much sewer you're delivering, it's a lesser number than if you were designing a gravity system, which can be a saving there for you.
Question, does the main collection plant need to be manned?
No. Actually, most plants that we've got internationally, people don't go to them anymore.
So the monitoring is at the, in this case would be at Boynton?
That's right. Yep. Yeah, all the information would come there. Yeah, or our global international groups also have some oversight on some of these to be able to offer support to someone like Boynton who's, you know, be their first time. So our international group would also support that, or the guys up in Palm Coast. So the capital cost for these sort of systems, if the red line or the orangey line is gravity, so it can vary a lot. This is in these coastal sort of areas, high water table. So it can vary $20,000, $25,000 down to a few $1,000s, depending on how many pump stations you need. And yeah, so it can be all over the place. The yellow line tends to be a low pressure pump system because you're going to have a pump at each house, then it's going to be the same price whether you've got 10 houses or 1,000 houses. It's always going to be, you know, $12,000, $14,000 per house. If it's a vacuum system, there's a scalability because your most expensive equipment is the pump station. So if that's a $500,000 piece of equipment, then, and you've got a few houses connected to each collection pit, then the more houses you have, then the lower overall cost it is. The operational cost, energy's is a big one, becoming more and more an issue with how much energy costs. Operator, the knowledge and skills, resident disruptions, impact during extreme weather events. I think I've seen articles here where it's talked about hurricanes, vacuum systems are great because you've got a single pump station rather than having 10 stations and, usually it's going to replace an area like this, 5 to 10 gravity wet wells which have pumps and things like that. You've only got one station with a single backup generator at that. Up where our office is, they've got these PEP systems, which are the effluent pump systems. So of course, if you get a hurricane or extended power outage there, then you're out for days. You can't, it says you cannot use water in your house when you've got a power outage because it's got nowhere to go out of the system. Energy costs with, pump at each house relative to gravity where you've got multiple pump stations relative to a single vacuum pump station is quite substantially different. With a vacuum station, you do have those vacuum pumps turning on and off through the day, so they'll only turn on during the night once or twice, so you don't have them on 24 hours a day. So the vacuum pumps will only run 5-6 hours a day. The sewage pumps will run probably 2 hours a day as they pump out of that big collection tank to send it off to the treatment plant, so they're not on all the time. On how much these systems cost to operate and maintain and what the problems are with them, we've done benchmarking studies around the world of how much it should cost to maintain these systems. So I've done this with a number of schemes around the US as well. We did a project for Jacksonville JEA last year on their schemes to have a look at the cost of theirs. And I won't go through their numbers because they weren't particularly flattering for them. But somewhere like Key Largo and Marathon, I looked at the age and how remote these were. So this is a few different projects. USA 1 on there is Key Largo. USA 2 was Marathon 4 years ago before Dan South took over as manager there. So that number, the large number, the grey number, that's based on the modelling on the higher the number, it should be more expensive. It's an older system or it's a more remote system, so it should be more expensive to maintain. The dollar signs at the top, that's a cost per lot, per house, per year to maintain the system. So that USA 1 Key Largo is showing $45 per house per year to maintain the vacuum system. Now that's made up a whole number of factors. This is quite a low number. Yeah. So I've been through this, with a number of operators to understand this. Now this isn't the price which I would maintain it for you, by the way. But this is an idea of how much this should cost. If I had an operations group sitting here and we're doing systems up and down the coast, then this is what it should cost. Or if you were going to do it yourself, this is sort of the numbers you should have in your mind of what it should cost. So Key Largo is a large one, as I said. They've got 12,000 connections, 4,000 collection pits. They've got 6 vacuum stations. And so when I went through with the manager there of all the numbers, we went through the energy cost there for all the stations, $240,000 a year. We talked about how many operators. They had 6 dedicated operators, two people for each 2 plants. We looked at the number of call-outs opening needing to the system, emergency call-outs, how long they were in the field. So we went quite in depth into all of these costs, which came down as just under $45 per house or per connection per year. So it gave a lot of comfort. So that's why we do audits. So a lot of our business right now in the US is going to existing systems and saying, how well are you doing? They might complain and say, oh, vacuum systems are really expensive, they're hard to maintain, they're a real problem. But well, let's have a look at it. So with JEA, we went through the numbers, and they were high numbers, significantly higher than that, more than 10 times that number.
That's relatively low, but we would still have the connection cost we'd have to pay Boynton to treat the sewage. So that would remain the same. That's not going to change.
No.
But the $45 is basically pocket change. I mean, you're talking about $4, less than $4 a month.
Yeah. Well, this first one there, Barradine, this is a remote town that I was looking after, and the utility didn't want to look after that, and they asked us to do it. We just hired a local plumber. The local plumber walked down the street once a week. It was 400 houses. 100 pits. So he walked down the street once a week and had a look, make sure the pump station was standing, but there were no real issues. It was only a a dial-up phone system. It wasn't a fully monitored system. And he handled the call-outs. And because he was a local plumber in this small remote town, he sort of knew that there's a problem on Saturday, there's something blocked out there, the pumps are running too long, that, Fred had a party on Friday night, more than likely. He threw things down there, let's go and check that one out first, and sure enough, that'd be where the problem was. There's that sort of local knowledge that helps. You've got a much more complex community here, so I won't like into that. But all we did was pay the local plumber, $1,000 a month to check that out, so it was quite low. But we have a good handle on all of those. There's a variety of systems which the alternate sewer system WEF book sort of talks about. And of course, there's a lot of positives on vacuum. It's just that ease of install is really the biggest thing for your community. The least amount of time you're bothering people is the best. Where we've looked at gravity, like one of the projects I went to, that bottom right one, where they ended up losing the tractor, pleaded with us to call a developer and convince him to use vacuum.
This is your objective.
Trying to save you a tractor. So quite often we're getting our projects from contractors calling us up and saying, can you please talk to this town? Can you please talk to this developer? We've used vacuum before, we've dug it in the ground, we want to be able to do that. You've now got a few contractors around here which have done vacuum projects, so that's good. But we've dealt with a variety. We usually take them through a training courses to have it, the do's and don'ts, what is vacuum, so they understand all that. And we take them through that process, and we sign off, and we give accreditation on all of that. Residents, no infrastructure on their property, no requirement for utility to enter their property, fast installation, no impact on access, no individual homeowner power cost. So if it's a pump station sitting on the property, then they've got that power hookup issue. No disruption to service during extended power cuts, hurricanes. You get a hurricane, you've got a backup generator at that single pump station, keeping everything going so people can still use the showers, they can still go to the toilet. You're not telling people just to hold off, don't go, cross your legs. No odors, no noise. Like for the ones in Afghanistan where we're doing that in the military camps, the last thing in the world we wanted is noisy infrastructure, so we've got to make sure all this stuff is fairly quiet and we can soundproof. So it depends how close houses are and we can mitigate against that. And reduce risk of any overflows or pollution. You can't cut these pipes and have them come out. The environment, it's the same thing. It's exfiltration, no infiltration, low energy. We use it a lot for black and grey water. This is showing that no leak. So they pulled a pin out of the pipe work there. You can see it'll go into slow motion. There's no water leaking out of that at all, but you can see air going up into it. So air's going in, everything's still moving. Doesn't change anything. We've still got vacuum pressure down the line. So it's nice and safe. I noticed in the article in the Sun Sentinel this morning, which was talking about Fort Lauderdale. The only way they were finding sewage leak was some kayaker pointing out some bubbling thing in the canal. That's not the way you want to find out. You want to call it out a leak. And the operators, they really prefer vacuum systems because they're not in touch with sewage. It's dry environments all around. The pump stations are, they can have a picnic in there. Some of the sorts of projects where we're dealing with higher flow, this is an area, we did the rebuilding of Christchurch after they had some earthquakes there in New Zealand. So this is a high flow, that big shopping centre there, the Palms, that's got a double pit. So some of your condominiums will have 2 pits. So that there on the left is 2 manholes you can see on the ground, and that has what we have, the house vent, we just have sitting in those little pillars there. It just looks like electricity boxes, something like that. We've got our monitoring equipment in there. So we will have some small box somewhere near that pit, which we'll need to figure out what's going to suit best in your community. When we do really high flows, this is an oil refinery, then we're going to build a larger chamber, a concrete chamber. Like you might want to just, I know with some of your pump stations you've got in your larger units, you just want to pull out pumps and maybe put a couple of valves in there instead of have to go and replumb everything, then we can look at that. So we've certainly done that in a lot of areas where we've gotten rid of small lift stations and just replaced it with pits with 2 valves or 3 valves or 4 valves. This one's got 6 vacuum valves, so we've got a splitter going to 2 large concrete chambers, splitters in them coming with 3 valves each at the end, so 6 valves there is how we handle the high flow. This one's a large station looking after 5,000 houses, so they wanted a single station rather than 15 gravity stations they were going to have. But you can sort of see there, they've got 10 vacuum mains coming into that station, so luckily they had a lot of room to do that. You're going to be your restriction here. If we go to one station to make sure, I think it'll be 4 vacuum mains coming into it, but we've got to have room in the ground for vacuum mains to fit. And, tiny
2 north, 2 south?
I believe so, yeah.
Facility.
Yeah. So for them, one of the benefits for this community on why they went vacuum was there was a treatment plant limitation. It was sized for a particular size, and for this developer, he was going to have to pay for a big upgrade to the treatment plant. But because he went vacuum, he was going to have to do a wet weather allowance on his flows. So that meant that on his average, on his flows, peak flows that he was going to have coming from this development, meant that it wouldn't bump up against the limit on the treatment plant. So it saved him a lot on that. He actually came out in a news article saying that it saved him more than $10 million just on the reticulation and pump station, just on the gravity system there, let alone what was going on with the treatment plant. And this one, they used all apartment blocks. They used great big concrete pits there because it was just coming down to the bottom of the beach floor and doing that. That's in Thailand. This one in Bahrain, all those funny islands they've got in the Middle East, well, they're all on vacuum systems because you couldn't serve it any other way. You couldn't have gravity systems in there because you're just on rocks. So there you've got 10-story buildings and 30-story buildings, and there's a 55-story building there, which we said just put a pump station, a gravity pump station at the bottom of that, pump that into the force main. That would be so much easier. You don't need to have, we needed 50 valves there to look after that one building, and they said, no, it's got to be all vacuum system. It's all fully monitored, and that 55-story building isn't built yet, but it's a lot of the other stuff is built now and up and running. This looks far more similar to Florida. This is area in Queensland in Australia. I keep on talking about Australia a lot because that's where I'm based and that's where I do the projects, but most of our projects have been done in Europe. We've got 300 projects throughout Europe, a lot in the Middle East, a lot in Asia and Australia. We're doing stuff in the Caribbean at the moment, just done a project down in Chile. So I'll talk about the US next year when we're doing a lot in the US.
Where is that in Australia?
Queensland, on the
Where?
Gold Coast. On the Gold Coast.
Oh, so it's
Near Hope Island?
Near Brisbane?
Yeah, just to the coast from Brisbane. And so this area is all vacuum systems. In one area they started doing gravity, but the gravity pipes, because of the soil there, started to shift the wrong way, and so they're replacing all that with vacuum. But we've got golf course resort developments, we've got small areas which were on septic tanks, we've got a resort, eco resort there. So you just got to figure out your catchment area.
Surfer's paradise.
Yeah, you've been down there.
Many times.
Well done. And we do a lot of marinas around the world, so I don't know if you got that as an integration here. I don't think so. Further down the coast, we've been helping Fort Lauderdale Marina with their upgrade. But most of the big marinas in Barcelona and through Spain, through Greece, Italy, we're just doing them in the Bahamas now. In Australia, we do not just the boats, but also the hotels, like the W Hotel there, the restaurants, all the shops and apartments around the marina as well. We also do separation of the oil and charge the individual boat owners for the sewer discharge. I know I'm running sort of close to time on you, I think, and I know you want to ask a few questions probably, but this is the monitoring system that we've got now. Over the years, we've developed a lot of different monitoring for the reticulation, and the reason we've pushed that, we've always had a pump station monitored to know what the pumps are on and off, and that integrates usually with the utilities SCADA network. But over the years, I've noticed either large change of personnel and operations groups who go out into the field, or it doesn't fit quite into the model that the operations groups have when they're dealing with vacuum. It's a different animal, it's not just a pump. So it's slightly different, and they find it hard. And so you get a lot of people who complain and say, oh, it's just hard and it's not that easy. We don't know where the problems are. So I've really been pushing on monitoring in these systems for quite a while. So part of the standards we developed in Europe 15 years ago made it mandatory that all systems have monitoring. So that's why we have 14 people looking after 100 systems in Germany, because it's all fully monitored there and has been for quite a while. A lot of that was done using cable. Then we went to wireless, and we tried a variety of different wireless type systems. But we've now developed the system, Laura. We had to focus on security, local equipment. We had to focus on the ease of installation and all the systems here, that it was going to be able to fit into other people's systems as well as our own. Battery would last a long time, and energy wasn't going to be a big issue. And we wanted two-way communication. We wanted to be able to activate things if we wanted to. Because when I described how vacuum systems work, it's air that's pushing sewage through. And that changes how much air you need, depending on, if you've got a coastal community, you might have no one there, like the one in New Zealand, no one there in the winter, or the opposite for you, you've got no one there in the middle of summer, and lots of people there in winter. Then you want more air pushing sewage along, while in the peak period you've got lots of people there and things moving. You don't want things just sluggish and sitting around. So we can control different valves and program them. And if there is a big wet weather event, we say, oh, you can't get water into these systems because they're tight. Well, homeowners do the wrong things, and they'll cut off pieces of pipe and they'll empty their swimming pools, or they'll do things, the system will get water in. So we need more air during that time. So we might program, like in Oregon where Michael's putting in a system now, they've got that occurring. So he's put a rain gauge at the station that when we get excess water, it'll actually increase the amount of air coming through the system. So we'll change a couple of the valves to enable more air coming in.
I have a question on monitoring.
Yep,
So this is system monitoring.
that's correct.
Okay. If we have a shared pit between a couple of houses, 2, 3 houses.
Yep.
The sump that's part of that pit is only gonna be on the size of 10 gallons, 20 gallons?
It's about,
What size?
it's close to 200 gallons, but it's going to fire every time there's 10 gallons in the pit. So
Okay.
there's a lot of volume in there for emergency.
Okay, that's,
Um,
and that doesn't monitor in any way that it'll alarms for that particular homeowner to know their pit's gone down?
No, it won't. We're going to have no communication with the homeowner at all.
Okay.
And there will be enough emergency storage there for that not to need to occur. The operator will get a notification if there's going to be, we have a high level float in the pit, that if it gets up to a certain level, then the utility will know. Now,
You would know before we have a crisis
yes,
that something backed up in the house?
that's correct.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
something
absolutely.
backed up in the pit, not in the house.
Well,
That's right.
no,
Well,
I'm
it'll
saying
start in the gravity line, but it
They'll
won't
know
get as far
before
as.
we get anything in the house.
Right, right.
That's my point, yeah.
So the moment the system's here, the only time the operator knows there's a problem and that the sewage is overflowing is when he's getting a caller from the homeowner saying, listen, I've just come back from 3 months vacation. I've noticed there's a swimming pool of sewage in my house, and all my antique furniture is now wrecked, and I just noticed that at Ponte Vedra in Jacksonville where they had that with an issue, and down in Key Largo they had a similar one because of course people go away for extended periods and it's always the most expensive furniture which gets affected.
I have a question. Why, when knowing what you just said, why would we want to have Boynton Utility involved in all? Because they're basically the output of the plant going underneath the intracoastal and the force main. So why, if it's only needs $45 a year of maintenance,
Yep.
why wouldn't we want to own the infrastructure and the operation?
Could do. You've got to have.
Meeting.
Sorry.
You have to have someone doing it. They've got to have a truck. Yeah.
It just occurred to me is that
Yeah.
it seems like, and they have no experience. You would have to train them very well because
Yeah.
they have no experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And I kind of like it when utilities look after things because that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to, dig up pipe. You could definitely have a local plumbing company do it. You need to have someone local who, and that's what if you hired us to do it, we'd just find a local plumber who would just go and make sure, and if it got called out at 3 a.m, they'd be going down there.
See, this guy sitting over there is wondering, what is he doing? This may be more work.
I would rather give it to Boynton Beach and let them have any headache, and if it costs me more money to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wayne.
Exactly. I agree, Wayne. Just give it to someone else's headache. It's always good, especially when you get hurricane situations. You're going to have people, is that guy going to be available for you at 3 a.m? If it's someone else's responsibility, you pay them to do it, then they're, At Marathon, they've got 1,800 collection pits, so we've been rolling out just with they're high flow areas, so they've got a lot of condominiums, they've got a lot of hotels, things like that. And they were having quite a few issues in their system. They've got a really good operational crew, but they've got 5 pump stations. So this area, which is area 6, you sort of see where the red mark is. That's where the pump station is. There's a vacuum main, which is a 10-inch main that goes all along from that bottom line, from where the red part is, along and way up to Highway 1, and then down Highway 1 to the end there, which is the end of the line, and that's 3 miles. And a lot of their biggest flow, all those green lights, which is where the pits are, that's because that's where their high flow pits are. They're all the condominiums. So they got a problem, and they've got a lot of the big flow coming right at the end of the line, which isn't where you want it. You want it evenly distributed and things like that. But they were getting situation at the end of the line. They were getting no vacuum at all, not enough pressure to open the valves, getting flooding at the end of the line, no service for people, which is a real concern. And so they thought it was bad construction along the line. They were going to rip up lines and Highway 1 and replant stuff and try and figure it out. Once we had the monitoring up, we could actually have a closer look at what was actually going on in their system. So we could look at, it's not very clear, there's a lot of information there, but individual information about the collection pits. It has the alarms, it has the alerts, it has the opening time. So I talked about the counter, how long you have the valve open for, how much air comes in, so you want to know that. And the counter, how many times that valve is fired. So the very first one on that list there is the Holiday Inn. And it's small writing, so I apologize for that. Holiday Inn, and it's saying there that its counter has been 1,443 operations. So that's in a day, the last 24 hours, it's operated 1,443 times. In a normal household situation, that valve should operate, you know, 3 houses connected probably 60, 70, 80 times a day. If we're in a high flow condominium type thing, I'd expect that maybe 200, 300 times a day you'd see the valve operating. It's going to operate more than a single house. The Holiday Inn, and it's got 2 valve pits there. There's another one a bit lower down. You can sort of see it's operated only 55 times. That top one, when we first put this in, that was operating 4,500 times a day. So the counter, when we first put this in, 4,500 times a day, and the one right underneath that says Island Fish Company, the restaurant, right over the road, was 3,000 times a day. So in one section, so if we look here, I think this has probably got a pointer on it. No, the pointer doesn't work on the screen. The 2 parts there, either side of the road, the 2 valves there, you know, quarter of the way down the system, is where those 2 areas were. So they had massive amount of flow going in right at that single point, which meant that down the line they weren't getting enough vacuum pressure to keep on going. So that's what I talked about. You've got to have vacuum recovery. You've got to design it so it's coming in at the right level. So what that meant was the operations manager could see that, the amount of times the valves were operating, how much flow was going in. It was operating 4,500 times 10 gallons. You know, look back at the contract of how much Holiday Inn was supposed to be putting in, and it was so much higher. So you could have a conversation and say, hey, you're putting all your laundry in there, which you're not supposed to do. You're putting all this flow, you're not supposed to do. You go to the restaurant, you're putting all your trade waste into the system, which you're not supposed to do. A whole lot of other stuff, you're supposed to be doing this amount. So they've had the conversation, and now we're back to 1,400 and 300, which is, you know, manageable and fine. They Holiday Inn pay a bit more money, but how would they have known that with the gravity system? How would you have known that one of these, you know, commercial people coming into your system is doing 10 times what they should be doing? All you're knowing is you've got problems in your system, which means your operation costs are going up because you've got more call-outs. The system shows the vacuum pressure in the line, so at the station, at the end of the line, and we can move this pressure area around in the system. So with this one, what we're looking for is that red one, we've got just around off Highway 1 on the right-hand side, just coming off the road, we've got a little vacuum pressure gauge there, because we wanted to see where they're losing pressure between the station and the end of the line, whereabouts is it? And we've identified that it's a bit further down off Highway 1, there's a bridge, identified there by being able to put the pressure gauge around it. There is a construction problem further down, which is taking some of that vacuum. So they'll relay a small little piece of pipe over a bridge, which will give them more vacuum. And the amount of air coming through, we can adjust that. We've actually got now, at the end of the line, you can sort of see a little arrow on one of the green things, and that's an air injection system. So we've got a control of that valve. We have a program to say, okay, if if you've lost too much pressure at the end of the line while there's still good vacuum at the station, we'll just open that valve and inject more air in, because obviously what's happened is overnight you've got too much liquid coming in, it's filled up the lines a bit, let's just give it a bit of a help. It'll sort itself out over time, but why wait? Let's just help it out now so something critical happened, like we've got a storm. So what the operator started doing here, the manager, he's gone, okay, we've got a storm coming through here at 7 o'clock tonight. It's going to be a big storm, big deluge. Let's clear the lines out. Let's fire a lot of air coming system. You put a lot of air into the system. Here's all the lines out, back to the pump station, off to the treatment plant, so that when the storm hits, that treatment plant is going to get hit from a whole lot of other different gravity systems coming in, and it's not going to cope very well, which impacts on your community because the treatment plant isn't keeping up. So by doing this, it gives far more capacity to the whole network that you've emptied all the system out well before a storm's hit. So that for them is a big saving. Just helps them out. Here we can see the number of times the valves fire. So this is over a month or a couple of weeks. So all those squiggles, it's night and day. So during the night, you don't have any valve activations. During the day, you've got a lot of activations. So in that system, you're getting 1,000 valve activations per day. What's important about that is I'll look at that once a month. From my desk, I'll look at these systems. So I'm looking at wet weather events. If they've had a big hurricane go through, a big storm, we want to see, okay, how's that been impacted? So with this, we can pull in the weather information, the rainfall, which is what Mike's doing up in Oregon, and actually overlay that on the chart and go, okay, this is the rainfall, this is what's been going on. We know there's water getting in the system. How can we identify that? When we put this into Key Largo, just the first part of Key Largo, after 2 nights of it being in operation, we only had half a dozen pits sorted out. We noticed one of the valves was operating 10, 20 times, 30 times at 2 in the morning. We're going, well, who's having parties at 2 in the morning? That's really crazy. And we found out that was when high tide was, that they had a broken piece of pipe, lateral in their home, which was letting, as the tide came up, that was letting storm water come into the system. They had massive problem with the treatment plant for months on salt water coming to the system, which they couldn't identify where. Within 2 days, we'd find out exactly where the problem was.
John, could I get you to summarize?
Sure.
I think there's enough technical stuff here that the geeks among us, we could go on all day.
No problem.
I think you've covered most of the aspects that are general knowledge sort of things and things that are unique to our town. But I think we're going to have to move the meeting along.
No problem.
Okay.
That was my second last slide anyway, so that's good. I do have that information. Any information to go on with afterwards if you need.
Can we access this presentation in any way?
I can leave a copy for you, yeah.
Thank you.
I'll make sure there's one.
Thank you.
I'd rather not all that information go on the public
Yeah.
Understand.
forum though, if that's
By the way,
okay.
as a resident tech geek on
Yep.
this panel, I love the fact that you're on Laurel Lane, so,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, because it seems to be taking off. See, that gateway, once we have a gateway up in an area like this,
Yeah.
it can take 30,000 inputs. So if you wanted to have other information, whether it's to do with stormwater, or we've got one community's rubbish bins, if they get full,
Right.
then that notifies them. So, yeah, we can.
I'll explain IoT.
Okay.
Help you win. Guys.
I would like to visit a place that you've got one of these installed in Florida. Could you give us some references?
Well, I think you got to go to.
Trip.
I've got
Road trip.
transportation
Get a bus.
calendar.
Oh, no, you want to come to.
Neil's got it.
You want to come to
I wanna go
Surface
back-
Paradise or
I do.
Barcelona
I need
or.
the time to go there, that's why I'm having
Yeah.
to interrupt.
I was
Yeah.
thinking something around that area.
Yeah, no problem.
He's given me a good lead-in.
This is a process that towns go through regularly, and vacuum systems, once the town has a vacuum system in it, they will do more vacuum systems because it's an easy maintenance. Once they get a handle on it, things like monitoring have made that so much easier that you tend to find, it's a fairly easy process. Contractors certainly like it, and homeowners, they wouldn't know that they're not on a gravity sewer. There's no sign that they have to put on their house saying, well, don't flush X, Y, Z, like you have with some pump type systems. So you can just, a homeowner, as far as they're concerned, they're just connected to the main town sewer. It's looked after by someone else. You don't have, now we don't have flashing lights of operators having to move slowly down the road trying to figure out where a problem is, because they can now identify exactly where that is. So the way we tend to work is we'll work with the local engineering firm. So either way, but we would work on helping the design. So we usually take the utility through, or the town through a master plan of what can come in if things change, how quickly they can make decisions about that change occurring. You know, they're going to be seeing drawings, what do those drawings look like? We work with local engineering. We tend to take a professional indemnity insurance liability on these things because you want a single point of accountability. Because if you have, you know, it's our rules and guidelines which Ingenuity or ACOM or else you're choosing to do the design work for you. The FDP people we know very well, and we'll hope to I'll get some news for you next week on if we can get some discount for you on using a vacuum system for that. But then we'll work with, you know, you'll need to go to a tender process, and we'll help you with the specifications of what's required in that to help you out. But you've got plenty of other experience with those that have happened in Florida over a period of time. We'd probably just, you know, fine-tune some of the aspects to, you know, from modern standards that we use. And then we do the training course for the contractors, then usually a training course for plumbers who are hooking up to the houses, to the individual pits, and then we do the operations training, or as I said, we can look after the operations for you if that's something you'd like to look at. But we can certainly look at those costs. But, you know, our office isn't far away, so if you need ongoing discussions and questions, we're really happy to help.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Kathy, I'd like to move on to committee member comments, and I'd like to have first go at that if I could, because I'd like to ground us in a system, although it's by John's competitor, most of their guidance and advice to me was shortcomings in their system that John has clearly addressed and says is available to us. So on November 27th, I, through the help of Tracy and the town manager of Palm Springs, Florida, which is very close to here, about 15 miles to the northwest, has a population of 25,000 people, mostly single family, some areas that are similar to Briny Breezes, and some low-rise multifamily units. Typical of our layout and spread and distribution of the homes. It's a 12,000, excuse me, 12,000, that would make it really simple. It's a 12-foot NAVD, and they do not have water table issues. So it was a pretty benign condition, but their systems, their population of 25,000 people are served by a hybrid system, and the hybrid system is mainly gravity. That's the old part of their town. That's 20 plus years old, their gravity stuff. Things that they have done since then, as the town has grown in size or the town has expanded through incorporating neighborhood areas, they have integrated a vacuum system into their system. They have 3 distinct vacuum systems within their town. They serve 3,000 residential units, which is pretty close to our size. The reason they have 3 units is more because of geography than size. They have one of their systems that has 570 vacuum pits that would probably be close to what we would be incurring with our approximately 1,500 people or units that we would have to serve here in Ocean Ridge. If you could put up one of the pictures that we have. Okay, these are 2 vacuum units that serve one of their 3 lift stations. The vacuum station. The station that I visited was the one that serves 570 pits. Could you do the next slide?
Neil, if I could just comment on a couple of the photos. The vacuum pumps which are used there are standard pretty much in America. They're made by a German company called Bush, and they're made in the US out in Virginia, so 95% of the systems all have those sort of pumps in them. So they're locally maintained.
So this is the less than appealing, building that they've got it housed in. It looks very much like a commercial garage. The building sits on a 1,500 footprint. It's 30 by 50. It's single story, except it has what might be almost like a basement area, and we'll see that in a second, and that's for that large pump. This is a street view. This is as much as they've mitigated a few trees and grass in front of it. Go ahead to the next one. For anybody that would be interested, that's just a plan of the town showing the areas that have different sewer systems. The yellow area is the area that I visited. Go ahead further down. I don't think we've actually got the right slides, but we might have more slides than we need. That's a manhole that is a pit, and their pits are actually on shared property between the homes or between the homes in the street. Go ahead, next one. That's looking into a pit, and you can actually see water. When I went over there, it was just after several days of rainstorms. The water that's in the pit on the top side of the system has no impact at all on whether it operates, and as John says, it can be completely submerged. Go ahead. Yeah, you grabbed the wrong slides, Kathy. Go ahead, that's just showing their maintenance shop where they actually serviced some of the valves when they've taken them out of the system. Go ahead to the next one. That's more of the shop. Keep going. I want to try to get to, okay. This is some of their very antiquated recording and operating equipment that's in their building. Go ahead to the next one. That's the generator that's also housed in that large 1,500 square foot structure. Go ahead. This is looking down at the collection tank. And so this is, Art, this is what you were talking about. This is the only part of the building that goes below ground level. Go to the next one, please. But it's all within the same structure. Next slide.
That's the last one.
Pardon?
That's all the ones that were in that file.
Yeah, okay. You actually grabbed the wrong file. I'm sorry, we didn't have time to go over those. Let's see. One of the other things that I did when we were looking at this building was I had a sound measuring tool with me. When the pumps were running, it was 90 dB in the building, which is on the borderline of needing sound protection equipment if you were a worker working there. We closed the doors. I got 5 feet away from the building. The dBs went down to 75. When I was 20 feet away, which was half the distance to the street, we were down to 65, and you hardly knew that anything was going on. The information that I got from them was they are strong advocates of vacuum systems. The impact on installation in the town has been much lower by doing vacuum. Their maintenance costs are generally higher for their vacuum, especially as you go over time towards a 10-year time frame. The vacuum system has become more expensive, but they said it's definitely mitigated by any time there's any problem within the town that requires infrastructure to be impacted. It's much easier to deal with it on the vacuum system versus repairing gravity or somebody else's impact on gravity. So the net to them, they said, is a plus. They would prefer to do gravity.
Gravity or vacuum?
Excuse me, vacuum. Wrong choice of words. Their maintenance and serviceability is impacted. Their system does not have the extensive monitoring that FlowVac is offering. So they have to have a high level of people available to quickly go out and try to manually identify where some of the problems are. And sometimes it's literally how many pits do you go to before you stumble across the one that's causing the problem. So they said if we were to go into this, we should go into it with the understanding that more higher tech and more monitoring is definitely to our advantage. The other thing that they indicated was in the environment that we work in and live in, that the building itself, wherever that all that electronic and monitoring equipment is stored, needs to be conditioned. Their building was not built that way. They've since had to partition the building and add a conditioned space to protect the electronics. And the other advice that they had for us, because I believe our system, we were talking about putting the pits between, or at least Boynton was proposing putting the pits between the lots within someone's private space, correct?
Yeah.
That occurs in Palm Springs, and they've adopted a philosophy that something happens in that pit is a maintenance item. It's not a neighbor versus neighbor issue that you put crap in, I don't. It's, we'll come, we'll fix it, and if we have to do any sort of behavior modification, it's done offline and it's only shared with the person that impacts. So those were their, that was their advice to us, but I think I clearly got the understanding and the feeling from what was there that it's comparable to what we have, and it's a practical solution. I met with the head of the utility department. I met with the head of the installations. I met with the sewage guy, and I met with the chief of the maintenance. So I saw it from all the different levels, and we actually went out and serviced one of these valves during the time that I was there, and it was a pretty cool system for what it does. So I think that this is within the I would think within the range of solutions that we can and should be looking at. So anyone else have anything they need to add to this meeting? I see this as the end of our information gathering. I see it as the end of our explanations of the technology that's out there, or the technology that impacts what the town is looking at. And I think the next steps for us are trying to meet the desires of the commission to take a first go at a roadmap. Does anyone else see that as in the range of possibilities?
No, I think it's the right idea. Let's do it.
Okay, so what I would propose that by the next meeting, I will take a stab at creating a straw man, or at least, so it's at least a talking point, or at least a structure, a framework for us to comment on what some of the next steps are, whether it goes from picking a technology to working on a timeline, to looking at the issues that impact getting the grants, collecting our own matching funds, look at how we would divide the system up. And I think today we've actually come to a crossroads. John is proposing something that is far less complex than what Boynton proposed.
Agreed.
And the cost, I mean, it's incredibly different, because we are talking about one less plant, and we're talking about one less intracoastal subwater connection. And it now gives us the option of, does Boynton want to participate, and can that facility be on their property, central in the town? Or if we're only doing one, we have the footprint available at the south end of town in the retention pond area that we can do it independently of Boynton. So your question to all of us, do we need Boynton? That's that's a discussion point.
It sure is. And I got the proposal, and they're charging Ocean Ridge more for the vacuum flow system than for the gravity in their proposal. So I think that brings it up to a point where that decision, okay, could be based on their ability to do the job and what their costing is.
But let's get into the meat and potatoes and see where we, where we can put a few stakes in the ground. I agree with Art that what we do today may not be what we would advocate today may not be what would happen in 5 years or 10 years, but I think we have to have a baseline that even 5 years from now, somebody at least will be able to say, well, they looked at this part of it, and some of that advice still applies, or that is not the way we want to go. So I still think there's value for money there, especially at the rates that we charge here on the committee.
Yeah, big time.
So, is it okay for me to go ahead and do that? And I will run my straw man through the town staff and get their comments first, and then it would be okay for the staff then to distribute it, I believe, to the committee members, and we
Before
can use that as a working document next time.
It's fine.
Do I have support on that?
Consensus?
Yeah, as long as it gets cascaded back down to
Of
us,
course.
an iterative process, then yeah.
Exactly, I would,
Yeah.
I would, I think
Because
it
we're
would
not
have
allowed
to be.
to, because of sunshine.
Exactly, I
Yeah.
mean, we have to have somewhere to start next time, in our discussions, so, I volunteer again to do that, or,
Yep.
or maybe I could take the first stab at it, give it to the staff could input it, and Ron or somebody could chew on it and go back through staff again, before we come to the next meeting. I don't know where, do you have?
I have a little bit of concern about that. That might be violating sunshine.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
think
Does
what we'll
that?
do,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you just have to be careful. I think if you just, if a member just comes up with something, distribute it to staff, staff can take a look at it and be prepared to discuss that, and then have all that distributed to all the other members well in
For the
advance
next meeting for
of the
discussion.
next meeting for
Yeah,
discussion
right.
without, because there is an issue with it going back and forth between, members. It can't go through staff to do that, so
Right.
I think it would just be better if
So
you.
every iteration, we have to have another public meeting?
Yes,
Yes.
Unfortunately, you do.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then I'll try to be as, all-encompassing as I can. And obviously, some areas will be very shallow, and some will be more detailed, and
Well, Brian, are we allowed to feed or share stuff before he starts?
No, what I would rather you do is you pass it to staff. You give comments to staff. And then basically what I think staff can do is staff can accumulate what everybody has when any board members, any members of the public, whatever, what they've received from anybody, and then staff can give that presentation at the next meeting and kind of say, here's what the chair has kind of come up with.
but I wouldn't be able to see something that Roy generated
No.
or Ron generated
No.
until the next meeting. They would just be in parallel with me.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Am I the only one that thinks that's ridiculous? I'm sorry.
I think we all do, but,
Yes.
and that's what I'm saying, I think
It is.
I or someone
We
has to,
agree.
has to do something that we start and, blow holes in or add to or say it's not the right.
So if Neil puts out a roadmap, we would get it in our package.
Yes,
Yes.
And
correct.
then we would be expected at that point in time, we could comment back to you for some comment, but theoretically, what would happen is that we
Yeah,
come
you
to this
won't-
meeting with it and we
Yeah.
bring it out.
And
You
discuss
could
it
comment
then.
to them, but Tracy wouldn't be able to give it to me
Yeah, I
until
got
it became public.
I mean, we would just have to be very careful about, when that goes out in your packet, then you can just be prepared to bring your comments or make
To the
comments
next
at the
meeting.
next meeting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, that's the sunshine law, which, That's the law. It could be deemed as the biggest impediment to good government that's out there, but anyway, that's what the law is that we have to follow. So, that's, what we're governed
So
by.
everything just becomes a comment then at the meeting, and we go
It
from
becomes a
That's
discussion.
right, and then
Yeah.
you, staff can take that and
Alright.
take direction from the board, and at your next meeting,
Yep.
say, okay, here you go. Yes.
So if you send it out, I'll make sure I bring my comments to the next meeting.
Okay. Okay.
So
So now
speaking
we
of the
set
next meeting, the next meeting, if we're going by the regular schedule of third Thursday, I have a conflict on that day. I'll be in Orlando at an insurance seminar, so I can't do the 19th. We have set it for the third Thursday of every month.
Third.
Can we do a
So
second?
third
Third
Can we
Thursday,
do the second,
the
can we do the second, the 13th?
Really nice.
Because of conflicts.
Yeah.
Can we do the 13th?
Is it the 12th?
Since this is the
12th?
second Thursday.
12? Well, so it's Thursday's the 13th, February.
If we can do the 12th, which is a Thursday, that would,
No, the 12th is a Wednesday in February.
oh, is it? No,
Right.
no, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
the
talking about
13th
March.
is-
I'm so sorry. I'm talking about March.
Oh.
Sorry.
All right, let's start again.
4 weeks from today.
When can we have the meeting? You are gone. in
February is fine. February is fine.
February
March
20th?
is my issue.
February
Okay.
20th is the next meeting.
February 20th then.
And just so you know, if you want me here, the third Thursday is always out for me. I can never make it on the third Thursday. I have a conflict. Given my great input on this meeting, I don't know if you want me here at these or not, but I just want to mention that, so.
So Brian, can you do the second Thursday of
Yes,
every month?
I can always do the second Thursday. It's just the third Thursday I can never make it.
So,
How does that work for everybody?
Hang on,
It works for me, because
second?
I'm pretty well into my draft already, so.
as long as we keep it at 8:30 in the morning, that's fine with me.
Okay, so
That's fine,
February 13th and March 12th.
Done.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Okay, so, do we need to have a motion on the meeting date, or that's just? fine?
Consensus is fine.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yep.
You got all want to return, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Unanimous.
Okay. Change that